When Lewis Hamilton announced that he was moving to Ferrari, I made a video at the beginning of last year saying that it was the biggest driver transfer in Formula 1 history. The most successful driver going to the most successful team, and of course Ferrari of all teams at that. And I think what we have seen over the past week pretty much sums up what I was talking about. Because the amount of excitement, the engagement, and just the hype around Lewis at Ferrari is something I've never seen before. Of course, it started all the way Monday, when he was pictured in front of Enzo Ferrari's house in front of that F40, and it's very, I think, rare to say that a picture is iconic the moment that it comes out, but that is definitely going to be an iconic picture, regardless of how this partnership turns out, whether Lewis wins a championship, whether he wins a couple of races, maybe grabs a couple of podiums, or gets nothing altogether in the next couple of years. It has become the most liked picture in the history of Formula 1 on their Instagram, and even Ferrari themselves, when they announced Lewis, they gained 460,000 followers on Instagram, and over the past week they've gained another 280,000 followers on top of that. Now, this is Ferrari, they are followed by millions of people, but I think it just shows how much engagement there is and how much intrigue there is, not just from Formula 1 fans, but from fans outside of Formula 1 that potentially might be interested in the sport. And now, some people might be thinking, why does any of this matter? Because at the end of the day, racing is the only thing that matters. But the truth is that in all sports, it is about the personalities, it is about the storylines. There will always be a core set of fans that will watch Formula 1, but to make sure that the sport grows, I mean, this was the effect of Drive to Survive, you have to get invested into the personalities, the storylines, the big moments, the iconic moments, and this definitely is one of them. Of course, we have seen Fernando Alonso go there, we have seen Sebastian Vettel go there, but this was definitely a different level. A reported 1,500 Tifosi arrived to see Lewis for the very first time in red at Maranello, and that's not people in grandstands, by the way, that is people standing by a roadside just to catch a glimpse of him. We also saw the big people, John Elkann, of course, head of Ferrari, Benedetto Vigna, of course, CEO of Ferrari, and Frederic Vasseur as well. It was all about creating and kind of building and starting that environment that Lewis is going to be in. And again, it was a massive moment, not just for what's going to happen on track, because that's going to sort itself as we go throughout the season, but it was a reminder that this sport is still growing. There is still a huge amount of intrigue, even from people who don't watch Formula 1, and it was definitely one of the biggest moments the sport has ever had. In terms of the on-track running, this has been said time and time again, but there is not really too much to analyse. Lewis did around 30 laps around Fiorano in the 2023 SF23, and it was more so about getting used to the team. This is the very first time that he is working with his brand new team, and it was more about getting correlation with what he experienced on the simulator. Of course, he did a seat fit on Monday, system checks, kind of communication with his brand new race engineer. Now, drivers over the course of the season have about 1,000 kilometers of testing that they can do between them. Charles Leclerc also did a few kind of kilometers and a few laps, but nothing major, because this was really kind of dedicated more towards Lewis to kind of integrating him into the team. There is going to be a much more important test at Barcelona at the end of January, which is going to allow Lewis to do a lot more laps in anger, less pressure, less scrutiny and kind of attention. It will be much more just down to business. That is going to be a much more better indicator of how quickly Lewis has adapted to life at Ferrari, adapted to the people around him, adapted to the way that Ferrari also works, because although racing is quite binary, everyone wants to win, everyone is just aiming to be as quick as possible. That's what every single person, whether you're at Mercedes or Ferrari, is trying to work towards. There's different ways of communicating. Lewis is moving to a completely brand new country, completely different culture of people, so all of that is going to be basically assessed in Barcelona. That's going to be our very first test, because how that environment is going to impact on Lewis's driving and how Lewis feels inside of the 2023 Ferrari is going to be our very first indicator of potentially how well he might start the 2025 season. The one thing that was undeniable is that Lewis looked unbelievably happy to be at Ferrari. It didn't look like he was overawed by the occasion or the pressure or the media scrutiny and speculation. He looked like he reveled in the adulation of the fans, the Tifosi, and that he was motivated by his new environment. Ultimately, this move to Ferrari is about him re-energizing as a person, re-motivating his career, having that new challenge, again, a different kind of pressure. In a way, also that kind of shadow of Michael Schumacher also being there. I mean, how many comparisons have we heard between him and Michael? Obviously, two 7-time world champions driving for Ferrari, because he kind of lost that motivation, especially in 2024 once he knew that he was leaving for Ferrari. And you could see that he just wasn't the same Lewis. And I'm not talking about the results, I'm talking about just mentally and the things that he was saying. He was really doubting himself. And that was kind of sad to watch, to be honest. This is a legend of our sport, potentially the greatest driver of all time, and he just wasn't happy where he was. And that clearly affected his performances. Again, whether he's going to turn it around and get back to his best or, win another title, only time will tell. But the preparation that he is putting in, especially with the people that he is surrounding himself with, I think shows that he has so much motivation to bounce back and not let the end of his career be defined by 2024. Of course, for this season, he is going to have a brand new race engineer. That incredible partnership with Bono has come to an end, and he is now going to be partnered up with Riccardo Adami, who of course was Carlos's old race engineer, so we're going to be very familiar with his voice over the team radio. But what's more interesting, I think, is the people that he has brought back into his circle. He has reconnected with Angela Cullen, of course his longtime physio during his title-winning years at Mercedes. He has also reconnected with his old manager, Mark Hines, and of course his dad is going to be there as well. Anthony Hamilton was there when Lewis first stepped into the Ferrari. Yeah, I just think it was amazing, and to have those people bringing that team back around him, it feels like he's trying to surround himself with people that he's very familiar with, whilst also settling in to a brand new environment. So it's a bit of a mix of a brand new team, brand new culture, brand new people, but also a little bit of familiarity, especially in his very close circle. One of the most exciting elements about the upcoming season, and Lewis at Ferrari specifically, is how he's going to compare and how he's going to combine, because of course it is a partnership, with Leclerc. Now, I don't think that it is a stretch to say that depending on how Charles' career ends up, and maybe we can have this discussion, in 5 or 10 years time a little bit more, but this could be one of the greatest driver lineups in Formula 1 history. Certainly, I do think that on paper it should be the strongest driver lineup on the grid in 2025, but it's very interesting because the circumstances, we have seen world champions go into Ferrari before. Of course, recently we had the likes of Fernando Alonso in 2010 and also Sebastian Vettel in 2015. However, the circumstances of how they came into Ferrari and the teammates that they had was very, very different. When Alonso came in with Massa as his teammate, Felipe was literally coming off of a season in 2009 where he almost lost his life. Felipe had a horrific crash when a spring from Rubens Barrichello's Brawn hit his helmet and almost took his eye out, so he was still kind of rehabilitating and basically finding his feet when Fernando came in 2010 after missing the last half of the 2009 season, and Felipe was never the same again. He was always the number 2. I do think that he lost a touch of pace or a touch of confidence or just something in that crash, and then especially with Fernando being the absolute monster that he is, Felipe was never the same driver that challenged for the championship in both 07 and also 08. Or when it came to Sebastian Vettel and Kimi Raikkonen in 2015, although Kimi is a world champion and an absolutely fantastic driver, for anyone that's actually gone back or actually watched the 2014 season, Kimi Raikkonen had one of the most low-key, horrific seasons for a champion I have ever seen. He was utterly dominated by Fernando Alonso in 2014. It was a really bad season and not enough people talk about it or even remember how bad Kimi was going into 2015, so there was no doubt that Seb was going to be the number 1 driver, and he was pretty much right away. So both of the teammates that Fernando and Seb had were basically coming off either really horrific, almost life-ending seasons or just really poor seasons in their career. Lewis Hamilton is coming up against a driver on the exact other end of the scale. Charles Leclerc in 2024 had the best season in his career. I judged him, if you watched my top 5 drivers of 2024, to be the second best driver of the season, only behind Max Verstappen. I even said in that video, and again this might be controversial, that if Charles Leclerc was in that McLaren, I think that he would have been the world champion. I think he was that good. The wins that he picked up and even the races that he didn't win and some of the podiums when the car wasn't as good, I think were just incredible. So you've got this interesting dynamic with Lewis kind of coming into Ferrari, looking to remotivate his career after having arguably the worst season of his career, and Charles on the exact other end of the scale, and how that emotional dynamic is going to play into their confidence and how ultimately that ends up with their performances on track is going to be one of the most fascinating things to watch in 2025. Ferrari now have everything that they need to challenge for a world championship. I think that this has been a journey that started all the way back in 2020. I think you have to go all the way back to when they were at their absolute lowest, when they had one of the worst seasons in the team's history, and they have been building over the last 5 years to this very moment to potentially win the championship in 2025 with either of their drivers. They reached a bit of a peak at the beginning of 2022, but then they were exposed. They were nowhere near as sharp and championship ready as Red Bull. The team, I mean, we all remember the chaos of the strategy, the pit stops. Charles Leclerc was a little bit crash prone at that point. Some of that was down to him, some of that was down to the pressure that the team was putting on his shoulders, which was way more than what Max was experiencing, and you could just tell that as an outfit, they were not ready. When Frederic Vasseur then came in and all of the changes behind the scenes that he did to professionalize the team, to make it a much more methodical and calmer environment, it has been building to this. If you actually watch the team now, or if you actually watch them closely throughout 2024, you can't describe Ferrari anymore as a chaotic or shambolic outfit when it comes to pit stops and strategy. I feel like if people do that, that's a bit of a stereotype now going back to 2022. The real facts are that Ferrari is now ready on the operational side, on the driver side, bringing Lewis in. Even if it's not, in some people's eyes, an improvement on Carlos Sainz, it's just that championship experience. It's just building and plugging all of those little holes, speed, experience, all of these little things that they need on the driving side. Now they have everything that they need on the technical side. The leadership we know is incredible with Frederic Vasseur. And they should be ready in the final year of these regulations, with how mature and stable these regulations have been, to build a championship capable car. They now have the drivers that can get that done, and ultimately it is now down to the technical department to build the car that they deserve. The only thing that I think could get a little bit tricky for Ferrari is the Drivers' Championship, because if you do have two really top class drivers, and even if you give them a car that is good enough to win the Drivers' Championship, sometimes, as Lewis himself actually experienced this in his very first season when he was partnered with Fernando Alonso as a rookie, him and Fernando took points away from each other. Even though that McLaren was quick enough to win the Drivers' Championship, in the end Kimi was able to get it across the line because he kind of had a bit of a comfortable edge over Felipe Massa in that specific season, whilst the two McLaren drivers were basically head to head. They took points away from each other, and we could very easily see a similar thing at Ferrari. And so whilst I think it is pretty obvious that Ferrari should go into the season as the constructors' favourites for 2025, the Drivers' Championship could be a different story. If McLaren and Red Bull also have a car capable of winning the championship, those are two teams, especially if Piastri does not up his game, who kind of have a clear number one driver. And listen, Formula 1 history has showed us time and time again that unless Ferrari have an absolute dominant car like Mercedes did with Lewis and Nico, it is better to have a clear number one and a clear number two. It has been amazing to experience the beginning of the Lewis Hamilton and Ferrari era. So much speculation, so much excitement, so much anticipation of what the upcoming season has in store for us, of course both for Lewis and Ferrari, for Charles, for all of us watching how that dynamic is going to work out. Is Lewis going to get back to maybe not even his best, but back to potentially challenging for a world championship? Are Ferrari going to deliver the car that their drivers deserve? Or perhaps are they going to disappoint and be maybe the surprise of the season in a negative way? All of these questions are things that are going to be answered over the next few months, but it has definitely been an iconic moment in Formula 1 history. Regardless of how Lewis and Ferrari end up, regardless of what it does for his legacy, this first week has been nothing short of incredible. It is something that I have never experienced, and it just builds even more hype and even more excitement for this upcoming season. I'm sure that I speak for everyone when I say that I cannot wait for February, the beginning of testing, and then the season beginning in March. Of course, going back to Melbourne. Anyway, there you have it. If you did enjoy this video, then don't forget to subscribe to the channel. That would be massively appreciated, and I'll see you in the next one.